Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Hertie School of Governance. Your timing is, as previous speakers have already said, impeccable. What better moment than right after these European elections to participate in your European week. Don't expect simple answers or simple analysis of what this election tells us. It's not easy to draw simple conclusions from Sunday's results. One thing is for sure, Europe is no longer taken for granted. It's no longer undisputed. Europe and European politicians have to deliver, like all governments and all politicians have to deliver. And the elections have only strengthened my belief that we have to maintain our focus on creating jobs and bolstering growth across Europe. And that's what people, quite rightly, expect. And in that respect, the elections really came too early. Some politicians will say elections never come timely. In the last few years, day-to-day management of the economic crisis has absorbed our attention. And Europe has had to take, and certainly the Eurozone has had to take, courageous steps. We had to adjust to a new reality, consolidating public finances, strengthening common fiscal rules inside the monetary union, supporting countries that lost market access. And during this period, it became painfully apparent that we need to tackle the interdependence between banks and member states. So we set about establishing the banking union at unprecedented speed. The case for a joint European approach was clear-cut, and we got it done. Not only to break the vicious circle between banks and sovereigns, but also to protect the taxpayers. And also to get credit flowing again, credit that is the fuel to our economy. And it's now up to the ECB to further restore confidence by means of rigorous stress tests on these banks. And banks will have to act to increase their buffers and restore their position in the real economy. These efforts have illustrated in my mind that we can strengthen our union by joining forces. We did not, as the saying goes, waste a good crisis. Now we need to make sure that we don't waste a good recovery in order to get better results. We're now gradually starting to see the fruits of our efforts. Market confidence is recovering, growth figures are becoming more positive throughout Europe, and the outlook is getting brighter in most of our countries. But while the macro figures are improving, many citizens are not yet feeling the benefits in their day-to-day life. Try telling a Greek who is struggling to survive that Greece now runs a primary surplus, which to us in the Eurogroup is an important indicator. But what does it mean in the life of people in Greece? Try telling a Spaniard who's lost his job that there has been a small reduction in double-digit unemployment figures. Try telling an Irishman whose house has lost a quarter of its value due to the crisis in the housing market that there has now been a modest rise in house pricing. So it's clear we still have a long way to go. We still have a lot of work to do to create jobs and to return to that robust growth, this time on a sustainable footing. As we enter into this new phase, our joint efforts have to be focused on creating the right conditions for growth. Not based on cheap credit, by using monetary instruments that some would prefer, growth without bubbles, strong and stable growth supported by real investments in companies and businesses, in education and innovation, both public and private. Growth that creates jobs, that those left standing on the sidelines, for those that are left standing on the sidelines, and growth that offers opportunities to entrepreneurs who are eager to restart their business. Now, how can we achieve this? How can we deliver these results that are so desperately needed? How can we help each other to reform our economies to make them competitive again in this globalized world? Let me stress that there is a huge potential for more growth in the Eurozone. To unlock that potential, action is needed, first and foremost at national level, at the level of national governments and national parliaments. But it's in our interest to all play our part. Countries are affected by spillover effects from other Euro member states. They can be positive, they can be negative, but as the crisis years have vividly shown, it was painfully revealed that convergence and rebalancing are necessary for the working of our monetary union. Recently, the OECD reported that if euro area countries could only implement best practices in terms of labor market policies, product market policies, they could together increase output by more than 6% in 2025. What a waste it would be if we failed to use this potential extra growth that can be achieved in the Eurozone. So, to my mind, the conclusion from this election, the conclusion from the lack of results we've had so far is that we must act, we must keep to our commitments, we must keep working together, commitments that go with being in a monetary union. On different occasions, I've argued that leniency on budgetary targets could be granted, but only if countries pushed on with the reforms of their economies. Now, we should address these challenges, both on the budgetary side and the need for reforms jointly, where they have so far been two separate strands of policy. And we have to ensure fiscal sustainability as a basis to modernize our economies. Today, I want to focus on areas that are within the competence of national governments, but also where there is great potential in almost all Eurozone countries for exchanging best practices. And we have a common interest in doing so. Let me give you an example. In the current economic environment, we are seeing an emerging debate on cutting taxes in almost all the countries. I think also in Germany there is now a debate on could we lower taxes. In France there certainly is. I know in my country politicians are looking for opportunities coming out of the crisis to bring down taxes. It's an interesting development and it's an opportunity for the Eurozone to find coordination in this field. We need to ask ourselves if we are considering the right measures. Whether they will improve conditions for growth, whether these kinds of tax reductions will create jobs. Now, you probably know what people say about economists. If you put two of them in a room, you'll get three opinions. This is often true, but taxation might actually be an exception to that rule. If you ask a room full of economists about taxes and employment, all of them will probably say that high taxes adversely affect our incentive to work, and that a high tax wedge on labor will make our economies less competitive. By tax wedge, I mean the difference between the net pay that employees see in their bank accounts and the cost to the employer that hires them. This tax wedge in the Eurozone, this tax wedge on labor in the Eurozone is high. It's probably too high. And in almost all Eurozone countries have a tax wedge which is higher than the OECD average. Furthermore, research shows that the tax wedge on labor has slightly increased over the crisis years. So we've taken steps back. In those difficult years, we had little other option. We had to bring our public finances back on track, and in many countries, higher taxes were part of that. But as we enter into a new phase in our recovery, we need to realize that the high tax wedge on labor is an obstacle to boosting growth and an obstacle to creating jobs, which in my mind is the top priority. It affects our competitiveness and distorts the functioning of our labor market. It makes Europe less attractive for businesses. So if we want to create jobs, this requires our special attention. Now, of course, countries differ in many ways, so I'm not calling for a full tax harmonization here, but I do see a common challenge when it comes to working for growth and employment. So I'm calling for a concerted effort to push each other as far as we can go to make our economies truly competitive, let's not accept the growth rate that we now have in Europe. It's not high enough, it's not good enough to bring down the unemployment which is so urgently needed. I see a crucial role for the European Commission. The Commission could and should set the ball rolling, initiating reform discussions with ministers coming to Brussels, but also outside Brussels, discussions in which we should address our budgetary policies as well as the reform agenda in a joint effort. As Eurogroup President, I want to see a Eurozone in which common policy challenges are put on the table, a Eurozone in which member states learn from each other, a Eurozone in which we benefit from growth in our neighboring countries, making use of the full potential in our economies. So jointly taking up reforms is simply a no-regret option. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. I'm confident that we've not wasted a good crisis in the last few years, but I also realize very much coming out of these elections that much better results are needed. Therefore, we need to ensure that we don't waste a good recovery. Challenges lie ahead, and it's our common goal to restore growth that creates jobs for those who have yet to share the full results, the full fruits of our nascent economic recovery. For the student who cannot find a job and is left on the sidelines, for the middle-aged worker who thought he had a job for life but then lost it, let's not accept the current high levels of unemployment. Let's not lull ourselves to sleep. Let us push ahead. Europe has always been a convergence machine. Let's get it started again. Thank you very much.